looking very dark. I mean, all the lights coming from behind. Board games, board games. We might be talking about finding the audience for your board game, but we're not gonna shout. Nothing is for everyone. Making something that everyone loves simply can't be done. At least not if you think somewhat pedantically, because there will always be one, two, maybe three or more people who simply do not adore your things. But that's okay, because as long as you know who it is for. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. is UK time. Time for Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder, episode 972. And I realised that it's exactly 4 weeks until episode 1000, which is exciting. I've still got three slots that I need to fill, but there's an amazing. I'm just going to read it out. It is Rita Model, Kirsten Lunde, Ryan Estrada, Glenn Ford, Jess Mederingham, Chris and Suzanne Zinsley, Natalia Pizarro, Kathleen Mercury, Eric Lang, Kristen and Andy Looney, Ellie Dix, Anya Coombs, Tori Brown, Eric Royce, Amabel Holland, and Elizabeth Hargrave are the people who confirmed that they are definitely coming. I mean, of course, things might happen, but it's going to be a great show. But today is also going to be a great show because Kirsten, I'm sorry, I kind of realised that you're Kirsten and Kristen's like Kristen Lunde. It's almost the same, but not quite. But Kirsten Lunde, actually, your surname's almost the same as well, Lunde, Looney. But
yeah.
But you suggested let's talk about a bit more about how things aren't for everyone. Who is it for? And yeah, why are things not for everyone? Why is it worth working this out? And then I maybe misunderstood, and I thought we were going to talk about how to do it, but we'll approach both topics. But yes, other than that, why? Sorry, Kirsten, I haven't let you introduce yourself at all. How are you? What are you up to generally? What would you like people to know about yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Kirsten. I'm in New Zealand, so it's 9 o'clock at night here. Quite the opposite of the end of the world. And yes, oh, thank you for pulling up Ovation. That's my big project. Well, actually, I consider I have two big projects I'm working on right now. One is Ovation, the classical music engine building game, which I will be launching in June. And the other is Questable with you with Bez, which is just a delight to work on with you. So those are my two current big projects that I'm working on. And I love working particularly on games that teach you a little something along the way.
And you've got other irons in the fire, don't you? Like there's other things that you're just working on and experimenting with and doing bits to.
Absolutely, absolutely. I definitely got bit by the bug and enjoy creating and designing. So there are always a few, aren't there? Some go on the shelf and then they come back out when you have a fresh eyes to look at them. But right now, a lot of my time is taken with Ovation and Questable.
And as an introduction to the topic, why do you think that it's worth thinking about your target audience? Why not just release your thing into the world and say, well, the people who love it will find it? Why not do that?
Yeah, well, I think the beauty of the board game industry and board games is that board games in general can be for, if not everybody, just about everybody. So that means there's a wide range of people and interests and things that people are looking for in their entertainment. So, and because there's so much, and because you're competing with so many other games out there for that attention, it is really important, not just from a marketing standpoint, but also very much from a design standpoint, to make sure that you're honing it, I think, with the people that you're hoping to reach in mind. So then you know both the kind of, like I was thinking about it in terms of complexity and style and any barriers to entry, because I'm all about accessibility. So so those are all really important factors to consider when you consider who it's for, and they can really inform your design choices. Particularly if you're thinking of those things, that helps you with those design choices to make it even better for your audience.
I mean, another designer said a very interesting thing. They suggested that if people are suggesting they claim that if people are suggesting lots of tweaks, if people are suggesting, hey, why don't you try this? Why don't you change this? And it would be a better game. Ask them if they would buy the game if you made those changes. Because if they wouldn't, maybe it's not worth making those changes. And the people that you should be listening to are almost the people who would buy your game anyway. And those people, you can say, well, how do I make sure that rather than just you buying it and then playing it a couple of times and forgetting about it, making sure that it's something that you love so much that it seeps into your heart and then you play it like every week or at least every so often, and then it becomes a staple part of your life, and then that's what helps these games to spread and for you to find new people. Because it's the old Mark Rose, well, so many people have said this, that you can't just be liked by everyone. You need to be loved by someone for it to be worth them really picking this up.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, and that goes right back to that how many games are released every year, and
Mm-hmm.
and if you design it, and even you can end up lukewarm if you take too much of that advice on, right? Like people can convince you to design it away from what you love, and then if you're not even having fun anymore, that's really tough. I took that path early on and went, oh, this is a good learning experience. Make the mistake and learn from it, and that was a really big mistake, was to take it away from my joy. Because very much I was trying to design it, Ovation in particular was trying to design for families like mine. And so I feel I'm particularly designing to what I enjoy in that sense for Ovation, because I was looking for families like mine that enjoy playing games and learning a little bit along the way and introducing it to their kids. But so I think it still went to a complexity level that wasn't my original intent. But so that's still a learning lesson for me, and which I've really enjoyed exploring with Questable, is that we're trying to maintain its accessibility, and we're getting opportunities to play with people who are not native English speakers. That's not their first language. We're getting to play with a variety of different ages and people of different comfort levels with word games, and really focusing on that and knowing that that's our audience, I think is really helpful to finding people who will love it, right? As opposed to thinking it's okay. It's an all right word game. I want to I've had people say that they're comfortable playing Questable where they aren't comfortable with most word games. And so that's really exciting space to be in.
That is awesome. And
Yeah.
sorry, I just kind of changed the side of the table I'm on, so hopefully I'm slightly better lit now because the light's coming from that side. But yes, I think it's really important to keep complexity and anything that can set aside your target audience in mind. I mean, but you've got to be honest. Are you trying to make a game that has the potential to sell millions? Or like, what are you aiming for? But like, when we talk about complex games, I mean, Wingspan is a fairly complex game, and that's sold well over 1 million at this point, which is amazing. But when I say that, like, you kind of know what I'm getting at. Like, when I was working on the game known as Yogi, the current way to play it, which is draw a card, read it aloud, do what it says, isn't the way that I had it when I launched the Kickstarter. When I launched the Kickstarter, it was the slow and sadistic mode, as it says in the rules, where you've got a hand of cards and then you give it to someone else, and then they have to do it, and then that person gives a card to and then you draw a card, and that person gives a card to someone else. So you're picking on other people, and there's a slight decision to make. But as it currently stands, you could argue that there's zero decisions to make in the game, although there are implicit. I've seen people say, oh, one finger touching nose, oh, one finger touching ear, okay, and then immediately they're like that, whereas they could be doing it with one hand. So that was a decision that they made, even though it's not a decision that's been signaled. But I would say it's gone for that I've removed the one obvious decision in the game. But that's not necessarily to the detriment of the game, because what that's done is allowed it to be instantly accessible. and for people to access the heart of it. And I still love the slow and sadistic mode. It's not about keeping everything that you love. For example, I mean, I'm sure there's lots of levels of Questable that you loved or I loved, and then we thought, you know what, this is maybe just not quite right for the game. And similarly for Seize the Power, I've got a very good example there that there was this very clever auction mechanism that I was so proud of, and I really enjoyed it because I love auctions. But then what's the heart of that game? The heart of the game isn't the auctions to get the power cards, although there needs to be some auctions or some way of buying them. The heart of the game is really in the negotiation, in saying, hey, please, can I use your power? And, oh, well, the bank should give you 5 money, but I'm not going to let the bank give you 5 money unless you give me 3 of it. And then it's about that kind of blackmailing backstabber. It's a very horrible game, some people might say. And that auction was a distraction. So now it's just quick sealed bids. It's the fastest auction type there is, and it works so much better. It gets to the heart of it. And I think by working out, target audience and focus of the game is that kind of a similar journey in determining the focus versus the target audience, if you know what I mean?
I think it very well could be because, certain people who like certain types of games will have different feelings about randomness in the game. Particularly, that's one that's come up recently in some conversations with other designers. It's how much randomness guides or determines the outcome. That can be for someone who's playing a really hours-long strategy game with lots of agency and decisions along the way. If the eventual outcome, I'm likening it to a very different kind of game with killer bunnies, where if the outcome is, well, which carrot is it that's the winner, right? That can be really unsatisfying to that audience. So understanding that,
if anyone's unfamiliar with this game, basically instead of getting points, you get a bunch of carrots, and exactly one of these carrots is going to make you win. So it's kind of like a lottery where the more points you get, the more tickets you're able to buy.
Yes, and you could get the majority of the carrots by a mile, and the person who got 1 carrot happened to get the winning carrot. And as long as that was a highly successful game, it sold really well, people enjoyed it. Then there's others that really didn't. So as polarizing as any games can be, right? But it was successful and people enjoyed it, and that's a style of game. And so if you're making a game for players that would be the same market as Killer Bunnies, throw in these wacky, fun, silly outcomes and journeys along the way, and that's fine. That totally fits your audience, and it fits the core mechanics, and it fits the game feel and game experience you're going for. But yeah, you don't want to throw that into, I'm sure, Scythe or Terraforming Mars. People would be very unhappy, I think, if all of their clever plans were for naught.
Of brain power doing that strategy, that would be really horrible.
Yeah. So I think it's important to think about those things, and really, and it helps you hone. I think a lot of us, I know I've over designed a few things, and this, even though I feel like I'm still early in my journey as a designer, I've certainly thrown everything in the kitchen sink in before, and then and that's just, it's too much. It doesn't focus on the fun. It's playing around with mechanics, and I'm learning and I'm enjoying the process of creating, but that's not, if it's not to the game experience that I want for the people I want to share it with and enjoy it, it's still not where it could have been, right? If I'm not thinking about those folks enjoying it.
Do you think that games have to have a certain amount of novelty, like a unique selling point, something that puts them above everything else? Last night, I've been talking with Alan Paul about auctions, going through the mechanisms for so long now. Last night, I just dreamt of an auction game, but it was a very generic one. You were just auctioning things and then paying some money and then creating sets, and I had no idea how much to spend on the thing at the start. And it was like the problem with auction games. Sometimes you just have no idea of how much something is worth. But it was a very generic thing, and like now I'm thinking like, is there value in making that when I could be making like slightly less generic things that people would be excited by a bit more, rather than saying, hey, here's a very simple, reasonably well made, but very generic auction game where you're just buying stuff and then putting them into sets. What do you think?
Well, gauging by success of other games again, I haven't played QE, but from everything I can tell about it, it seems very much, I mean, it's not themed, it doesn't have a whole lot of elaborate stuff. It's just the pure joy and taking delight in not knowing how much it's worth, right? It's
But I
kind
mean,
of
the whole
going,
thing about QE is that you're able to write what you want. And sorry, I mentioned in not knowing how much stuff is worth. It was just the idea of, is a generic game worth making? Because QE,
yeah.
as a example, is really unique amongst auction games. You can write literally any number you want.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
whole
but it's
game is about this seeping out of information and bluffing and how much are other people spending.
right, but it's not particularly. I mean, it's just exploring the auction, right?
Sure, but it's got a twist. It's not
Yeah.
just a generic thing. So my question is, at this point in the evolution history of board games, is it worth making a generic? It's kind of like that platonic thing. I mean, maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't, but this is what I envisage as the most generic auction game. And sometimes the most generic example of a thing doesn't even exist. But yeah, it it was. Is there value in making that? Because the counter, I mean, on one side, you could say, yes, people might enjoy it. And if these mechanisms have been shown to be enjoyable, then sure, go ahead. But then the counter example is, the counter argument is, why would people play that when they could be playing any number of other auction games that have an interesting wrinkle?
Mm-hmm. So you're just thinking that isn't doing anything new or innovative by
Yes,
generic. Oh, okay.
yes.
So because I was thinking generic as in sort of themeless and not
Oh,
necessarily
no, no, no. I wasn't meaning
creating a
abstract. I was meaning literally
yeah.
something that I could make a really good game, but I don't mean really good. I could make a good quality game, enjoyable to play, that did absolutely nothing new. And is it worth pursuing with?
That's an interesting question. Gosh, if I had those answers. I don't know what I would. I suppose for me, see, I take it back to who's my audience. Is it
Yeah,
if I'm the audience, um, it could very well be useful if it's got something about it that is I'm learning from, or is thematically interesting, or engages me in some particular way. I happen to be particularly bad with auction games. I'm terrible at them. I can never quite figure out how much I'm supposed to bid, which is probably why I haven't played QE yet. It sounds fascinating, but I think I'd be extra terrible at it potentially, or I'd be really great at it. Who knows? But I always have a hard time with that, figuring out
I mean,
what the
QE, I
value
would
is.
argue, is not an auction game like any other.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So
it's
maybe I'll be
so
great
out
at
there.
it. That may be my action game. But yeah, so I mean, for me, it would have to have some kind of hook that would get me, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be in the mechanisms for me, if that makes sense.
But yes, what you're saying is there has to be something new about it. Whether
Yeah.
that's saying, okay, I'm presenting, yes, we've had lots of auction games, but we don't really have an auction game that's just the simplest possible auction game. So this is exactly what you've seen before, but just boiled down to the simplest form. I mean, to be fair, I could, well, I'm not going to name names because that sounds like I'm slamming them. But yeah, there are a couple of games I'm thinking of where it was, hey, this is just what you've seen before in a smaller box, and it's made well, and it does well, deservedly so. And what you talk about having educational value or a new theme, that is bringing something new to it. So what I'm hearing as the unspoken answer is that no, unless you can, I mean, as a designer, maybe it's worth making it and testing it just so you learn more about the game and understand how it works. I mean, it's always worth doing as a design exercise to
Right.
improve your design skills and development skills, but maybe it's not worth proceeding with 2D pitching or publication level unless you can say, yes, this is doing something that I don't know of another game that's doing exactly this.
I think that's definitely happening in the industry as well. AEG just recently posted in their design group that they're really particularly looking for things that are new and innovative right now, and I think part of that is even these bigger companies have quite a catalog. So how much do they want to even compete with their own catalog of games on the market? If you have an evergreen, you don't want to compete with your evergreen, right? You
Although
want
it's
to.
nice to have sequels and expansions, obviously that helps it bring it back to the focus. And when, I mean, the next Wingspan expansion comes out, then magazines and video people will be reviewing it again. I mean, it's not like people have forgotten about that game, but it works for other games as well. I mean, like, if there was a new type of Yogi, let's say Yogi Party came out tomorrow, it's not going to, but let's pretend that it did. I think that as a result, there would be a few magazines or whatever that and websites that say, oh, this is a brand new game. Now we're going to review this. Whereas they might have reviewed the original, they might not have, but either way, they're not going to review a game probably from like 6 years ago. Whereas by adding a standalone expansion, now you can, and that's all the marketing thing where yeah, bring it back to the awareness. But of course, they don't need new pitches for that. For a brand new game, yes, absolutely, it has to. You have to be saying, who is this for? Let's take a slight step back because we've had a very long intro, but we've not really gone into recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. I am going to say that first I drew some letters, so this is the first attempt at the alphabet that I did, and I wasn't happy with that. For a bunch of reasons. And then I came back after a walk outside, and this is the second attempt. So ignore the E and the B. I totally redrew them. But all the other letters, this is going to be the indices on the corner of the cards, and this is all the other letters and numbers. I'm not totally sure about that four. I might redo the four, but everything else I'm happy with. I just worried that the four is a bit too spiky and a bit too not immediately like a four, if you know what I mean. But I'm happy with all the rest of it. And then I started doing some color explorations. And so this was the first one of the letter A, which I'm not happy with. It's a bit muddy. It's not bright enough. And then this second one, it's just a bit brighter. I'm really happy with this. And someone gave me some really good constructive criticism about the thickness of the lines, which I'm going to redo this along with the other 25 letters, but that's going to be the style. And I'm going to be buying myself some new pens just to make sure I've got enough ink to colour in everything without stopping, because I'm worth it. And it's like, yeah, I can afford and justify spending a good amount on expensive pens. And it's all. And hopefully, once Categorical comes out, people will enjoy it. The other highlight for me was actually between drawing the first attempt and then drawing the starting the second attempt. I played a couple of levels of Questable on my own. I tried it in the park, and then during my second attempt, the wind got too much and the cars were blowing away, so I came back indoors. But it was nice to be outside, and I feel like the new level, I assume you've not tried it, but as I woke up, I was like, yeah, that's a good level. And Kerry's coming over later today. And although I don't know if Kerry would be up for a diabolical level, but but yeah, I felt accomplished, and that's a good sign if you feel accomplished after something. But yes, talking to you, obviously, our chats was lovely. What were some of your recent highlights over the past few weeks? It's been a while since I've seen you. What have you been up to? How's Ovation going?
Yeah, Ovation is great and exciting. It's with some awesome content creators. Cobray and the brothers Murph have gotten their copies, and Dan Hughes there in the UK has a copy, and so they're all taking a look. Very excited. Working with the graphic artist on getting the page ready to go. Also, I had a wonderful visit with friend Jasmine. Jazzy Loves Games. She came and she's touring around the north. She was touring around the North Island here in New Zealand because she's designing a game called Aotearoa. So it's Aotearoa, which is the land of the long white cloud, is the name of New Zealand for the in Te Reo. And she is incorporating all sorts of parts of New Zealand into the game. So it was a great excuse for her to go around and play games with people and take pictures of sites and just love on this beautiful country. And so she came to see us in New Plymouth, and we played her game and another game of hers. We played Aotearoa. We played she's a very new game of hers called Origami, based on origami. So I got to fold some origami in a game, which was a lot of fun. Very creative, and she got to play Ovation. So she's helping me play test the solo mode. So that's been just wonderful. She's just I'm so happy to have met her. Another wonderful designer here in New Zealand. Great community here with the game artisans of New Zealand. Just all really supportive and kind folks. And then Tuesday night I went to a gaming group, which has also been wonderful and supportive. And they played for me. They played our.
Before we get when we're talking about the Ovation and when we're talking about finding the audience, who is the audience for? Very quickly, because this was designed with you having education in mind, but it's also quite a strategic game, and it's not necessarily something for very small children.
Correct. It definitely got up into the, I've been saying it's 10 plus. And definitely younger kids in gaming families could definitely approach it, because my youngest has been able to, and another friend's youngest, that are under 10. But I think 10 plus is a better market for it. But I definitely have been thinking of game school, homeschool families, because that's when I started designing it. And so there's a lot of facts on there. There's the whole bio for every composer is on the back of the player boards. So, and I'm always excited to talk about those composers and share what I've learned along the way. And so, yeah, I've had other elements of it that I've gotten rid of to keep the complexity from going even more beyond that market of 10 plus. What's been interesting in the play testing is I have found young men from teens to early 20s have really responded to the engine building. And I've been like, that's wild. Are teen boys my market? Because I really designed it with my son in mind, and now he's 13. So it may have ended up being who the target is for. I mean, I've had young women and older women enjoy it too. I design it with me in mind, and I'm kind of an old broad, but
I find it's interesting because you can come to your target audience, because part of the overarching question here is not just why is it good to find a target audience, but how. And you did it by focusing on just one person, which I think is a really good way to do it. Like, there was a time I never finished this game, but I play tested with someone all the time, and they liked some of my games. They actually bought a few, but like, I know that my games weren't exactly what they really wanted. What they really wanted was like, I'm not saying they had specific tastes that they didn't go out of, but I got to know this person, and I was like, hey, there is a game that this person wants, this fellow designer, and for whatever reason, this game doesn't quite exist. So could I make that game, and could I have this one person in mind? Because if you have one person in mind, then there's likely to be other people exactly like them. Because, for all our idiosyncrasies, we are not unique snowflakes. We are in a sense, but we do share so many traits with the rest of humanity. almost everyone has two eyes, to like talk quite flippantly, and of course not everyone does. But anyway, the point is that you can also go the other way and just come to it from a sense of, okay, my audience is people who like this, and then you're kind of coming to it from a focus of the game. And when you said maybe finding focus is very connected to finding your audience, I'm starting to feel like that's something that I've realized during our conversation, that if you say, okay, this game is about for Seize the Power, this game is about bigotry and discrimination and the imbalance of power and how people can be jerks to each other and that all blackmailing and all that corruption in the world. Then who the game is for is basically people who are willing to explore that subject in the medium of a board game. And like Ovation, it sounds like, if you look at it like, okay, who is it for? You could say, well, it's for people who are interested in learning about composers from an engine building perspective and going through that sort of activity, but then also learning a bit during the game, and people who, and so you kind of come to it of, okay, this is what I'm making. And as you start the game, you could make literally anything. It's like a game about writing words, aiming to match them other folk exactly 3 times. And in that game, I think the first time you submitted it, there was so much going on, and it was and it wasn't so
Over
much
design
of finding the audience as it was, hey, this is a cool thing, and the audience is people who like this one cool thing. So it's almost like you're finding your audience by default. But of course, with bigger projects, I think you do need to approach it from both ways at some point during the design, ideally. Both what is my psychographic like? What kind of things are they likely to enjoy? This person who enjoys this, what kind of age are they likely to be? What kind of who's going to buy the game for them? Are they someone who's going to buy the game themselves, or is it going to be a parent who buys the game for them? And Questable, is it going to be people who are new to Words games who are going to buy it, or is it going to be people who have already played lots of Words games and want to introduce it to other people? And you can also think of it in terms of who's your audience for early adopters, who's your audience once it goes out, like the pinpoints and then out and then out. But yeah, it's a gradual process, I would say. But sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to talk about Tuesday.
That's quite all right. Yeah, and in fact, it's great because it's a great segue back to it, because we got to play a game about writing words aiming to match other folk exactly 3 times is what I got to play on Tuesday, and that was with a group of, this is not non-designers. These are people who gather every Tuesday to play games, and I needed some video footage for us for our sizzle reel on it. And so I was like, hey, would you be willing to play? And I did the short version so I wouldn't interrupt playing published games too much that night. So we only did 6 cards. And when I flipped to the last card, I said, okay, this is the last card. And at least 3 of the 7 folks at the table went, aw. And they were disappointed it was already coming to an end, which was a great sign. But yeah, they were at finding an audience. It was all gals. It was some teenage young women and then some of us older gals, and they all had a really great time. They laughed a lot. They said that it was a perfect introductory game for the night. Like, it got everybody comfortable hanging out with each other and getting ready to play games. And one of the gals said she could see taking it to work and doing it at lunch, or doing it as an icebreaker for functions at work, or that sort of thing. So it was really delightful. It's the first time I've gotten to see and actually experience what our market might be for the first time, because you just sent that to me in my wonderful box of busy goodness.
That's really interesting, like this exploration of who is the target audience. You can also do it through I wouldn't really call it playtesting at this point, but it is of a sort. Because even after a thing is published, um, it can be refined, but it depends who's publishing it. Like when I publish something, if I print, I mean, the most I've ever printed of one thing at a time has been 3,000, and that was of the original Wibble++, now known as the LDEC, and it was a fine number. And by playing it lots and lots, hundreds of times, probably thousands of times with people at this point, I've learned, okay, this is what this game's for, this is what this game's for. And it's not so much like the deck has a target audience as the individual games do. And that is one downside of a multi-game game system, that your target audience is really hard to find. And I do want the L deck to be a game for almost everyone, but even there, if you really want a thematic game, that's not going to do it for you. I mean, they are just letters on cards with numbers and a suit, and so you kind of have to be willing to put up with word games or something fairly abstract or something based around language or speed recognition. Or putting things in order. You can't get a deep board game. Obviously, you can't get dice rolling if that's what. And inherent to the deck, there are limitations. But I think I do believe that there should be at least one game eventually, hopefully, for 99% of people, let's say. But it's about finding the target audience for those specific games. And that's the key thing. Because as you go more and more generic, then you don't really know what to present to who. And one key skill that I found at conventions is when someone comes over, ask them, what kind of games do you like? Hey, do you fancy playing a game about drawing creatures, complementing the drawings and complementing the complements? Once you've said the title of that game, because that is one of my recent titles, which basically does exactly what it says on the tin, you know if it's for you or not. And if they say no, then I might say, well, what kind of games do you like? Do you like speed games? Do you like party games? Do you like words games? And if they're like, oh, I tend to like Euro games and I like engine building stuff, I would say, well, I don't have anything for you right now, but I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. And that's saving them time, it's saving me time, because you've got to know your audience and you've got to be able to narrow down who is this thing for, not only when you're marketing it remotely, but at conventions and just...
And the way I come to that is through working at an FLGS, a friendly local game store. I did that for 5 years and in the States. And it was really critical to be able to help people to get an idea of what things they've played and enjoyed. And if someone comes in and says Monopoly, some people point them to Catan. I point them to Ticket to Ride. That was always my go-to. If you like Monopoly, I think you're going to love Ticket to Ride. I still enjoy Ticket to Ride. I play
It's got the feeling of growth, I guess.
It's got those card sets, kind of like the color card sets, kind of like the color properties. It's got the nice little plastic building. You're building things out on the board with nice little plastic tokens. Right, so it can be set where in a variety of different places where you'd like it to be set. But that first one, since I was in the States, was set in the U.S. and as opposed to just Atlantic City, it's the whole of the U.S. So it's got a lot of things, and it's really accessible. And it's I've just not ever had it not hit. So just trying to find out what people enjoy. If they are looking for a party game, I would point them to something else. I certainly wouldn't point them to even to Ticket to Ride, which I still think is a great game, but it's not necessarily what they were looking for, what their target is. Or people are looking for
if you want a super social experience, then Ticket to Ride isn't going to scratch that. Maybe go for Just One as an example. That's a great game.
Exactly.
Or
say anything.
Our Own Horn. A game about writing words aiming to match them other folk exactly 3 times.
Exactly. That would be one I would point them to for sure. And I actually had a gentleman come in who worked with kids. I think he was a school counselor, if I remember correctly, but I know he worked with kids. And I pointed him to Stuffed Fables because we as a family really enjoyed that after every chapter of that story, there were talking points that you could talk to your kids about the little girl's fear of going to the doctor or whatever scenario she was going through. There were little talking points to talk with your kids about. And he was so fascinated that there was this sort of means of talking about feelings with the players at the end of playing a chapter.
Yeah,
so,
that's really
just talking to...
because sometimes that post-game discussion can be as valuable as the game. Like after you've done this thing together, you want to kind of decompress and talk about it. And so to talk about kind of real life issues that have been brought up thematically by this journey through mechanics is a really valuable way to have deeper conversations with those you love and those you trust.
Absolutely. And it's a delightful way to do it, and so non-threatening, so easy, so not intimidating, just this character, this other person had these feelings. What do you think? It's just a great introduction. And that all came about because we were chatting and talking about what he did and what his interests were, so that I could get to know him as a person and as a potential player and what he liked. So I've always found that to be really, really helpful. And that's obviously I was directly marketing games to people trying to sell games to people, but I never wanted. I never wanted to sell games to people that they wouldn't have fun with, because that doesn't do good things for the hobby, right?
100%. And for my own games, I would rather, frankly, with the how little profits I'm making on my self-publishing, I would rather forego that and not get a bad review on Board Game Geek. I would rather, okay, do you actually enjoy this game? Because if you're not going to enjoy it, I don't want you playing it. That's a waste of my time, that's a waste of your time, and you're possibly going to give a bad rating just because it's not a game for you. And we could have stopped that. I mean, I played my deck construction game last Friday, and I actually talked all about it, where one of the players realized they had an epiphany that they hate the notion of a deck construction game because you take time thinking about your strategy and then all the cards get shuffled, and they hate the idea of all their cards being shuffled. They want to know, okay, it's going to be that. And obviously you can't have cards come out in a specific order. That would make the game... It would reduce the possibility space of viable strategies, and it would overload players. I'm going to leave it at that. But I actually wanted to share this thing from my Kickstarter several years ago. I can't remember, what year was this? 2017, I think, that I did this Kickstarter. So this was for Kitty Cataclysm, and I wrote, this is a game for 2 to 5 players. So please don't back it if you want to play on your own or with 6+ people. This game takes 30 seconds to 17 minutes. And if that sounds far too long, or maybe only like games that are much longer, then please don't back. If you want a game that takes 29 seconds or less, definitely don't back this game. This game is chaotic. You can be a jerk to your friends and family. There are many cat puns. You need to think about what cards to play. This is pretty much the entire game. If any of that doesn't sound like fun, please don't back. Conversely, if you do like the idea of quick, chaotic game about card play and cat puns, please read on. And that's how the Kickstarter page started. So, I mean, it came from a place of me being concerned that people might just back it because they'd enjoyed one of my previous games and be like, oh, this isn't exactly like Yogi, or this isn't exactly like the L deck, and be like, oh. But I mean, that's maybe not the best concern to have, because I think people are intelligent to know that. But whilst I haven't reused those words, please don't back, on my Kickstarter since then, I do stand by the idea of saying very clearly upfront, this is what this game is. This is who this is for. This is what it is doing for you. For example, the generic auction game, I mean, the more I talk about it, the more I wonder if there is actually a really super generic, simplified auction game out there, I'm sure there must be like it. And maybe I should make it just like for the sake of it. Just like you pay money and then you get sets, and then the sets go up in triangular scoring. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know, but yes.
Can I interject on the this is a couple of topics ago when you were talking about the L deck and the different games having to potentially different markets. It's interesting because I'm definitely, as we're playing and exploring Questable, I'm getting a sense for a good amount of the market, I think, and who it will be for. And I'm pleased when we're able to still have an eye to accessibility and making sure that it's for as many people as we can make it for. But I also do throw in, there's a bunch of other games you can also play with this deck. It's like a bonus. So even if there's only one or two of those games that are also in their wheelhouse, it's still a pretty amazing thing to say. And this deck is super versatile. There's lots of things you can play with it. And I show them the 6 rules from the Wibble Plus Plus and say, look, this is what it came with to begin with. And that's not even what I'm going to play with you right now. So it's pretty cool to be able to have that broad of an appeal in just this deck of 48 cards. Kudos to you. I know I say it a lot, but I'm not going to get tired of saying it.
Thank you very much. And I am proud of it. And, one thing we've not talked about is a brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? I mean, yeah, I think, let's toot our own horn. Why is Questable brilliant? And let's just go back and forth until we run out of reasons. I think Questable is brilliant. The first reason is because the levels get harder, and you can say to someone, okay, where do you want to start? Do you want to start on easy, level 1, or normal, or tricky, or fiendish? And people will understand that and go for something that suits them. And so you can sort of, by choosing the starting point, tweak the difficulty to who you're playing with. Why do you think it's brilliant?
Well, one of the things I think is brilliant is even though the levels are different difficulties, they're also different feeling. If you're playing the level where you're looking at the borders, it feels different to a level where you're just making, and I shouldn't say just, because they're all interesting in their own way, but when you're focusing entirely on the letters and the words and not looking at the borders, there's a different part of your brain triggering. When suddenly we're adding up the numbers on the cards, there's a different part of my brain triggering. And it's been really fun to explore how different each level can still feel, even though it's increasing in difficulty. It's not the same thing increasing in difficulty. It's different sorts of mechanics and play that we're exploring that makes it harder, but also different.
100%. That was actually the thing I wanted to say next. So, like, compared to like where you're getting the massive variety, which I absolutely love. On the other hand, one thing that I also love is when you get a similar level, but there's like one small change that makes it feel very different. For example, we were talking about having 5 cards starting off, and so you have to make 5 rows of words, and then you have to clear them all, and then you could do the same thing, but now you've got blockers, which are cards underside, and you can't use any of those letters on this particular line. And so then you're thinking, okay, now I'm doing that same thing that I've already learned to do, so it's kind of familiar, but now this small twist makes it feel completely different. And the other time that there's a small twist that makes it feel completely different is just removal of letters, which is such a simple thing, but like your idea of, hey, let's just remove some of the letters. It's once you don't have the S, or once you don't have like N, R, S, or T, then you've got to really think about different words.
Definitely. And is it too much similar to say the mini decks and how some of the levels get, because of the mini deck where you have some letters that you absolutely must use, people have added a push your luck element, which I did not anticipate. So I guess that's a different brilliant thing, is watching what players will show you and create in play testing. And I didn't even think about a push your luck element and going, I'm just going to try to make this word right now, not knowing what's turning up next. And everybody's watching that turn of the card and going, oh, is it going to be the right letter? And no, it's not the right letter. And the table reacts.
So it's
That's
the emergent, exciting moments.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, having said all that, it's like, so Questable is brilliant. I mean, do you have anything else to say? I think I'm basically happy to stop there.
Well, I will say that what I have loved is, as I mentioned, we've been able to play with people who are not native English speakers, and I've been able to play with people who start by saying, I am happy, like with playtesting with other designers in particular, if somebody really dislikes a game style, like you said, much like you don't said on your Kickstarter page, please don't worry about playtesting if it's going to be a terrible experience for you. I don't want that. But I've had people say, I'm just nervous about my spelling or about word games, or I've had anxiety about them before, but I'm willing to play. And if they're willing to play and try it, I keep an eye on them and make sure and I check in with them regularly to make sure they're feeling okay. But what has usually happened, which is also feels really brilliant, is when they say, no, I feel smart, I'm feeling good, and they're having a positive experience when they felt, because it was an English language word game, that there might be a barrier to entry. So it feels brilliant when people find it accessible and feel smart and feel like they've accomplished something by beating a quest.
Awesome. I mean, I think that's a lot of brilliant things about Questable, because I do agree that it is a brilliant thing. But then the key thing, again, is that whilst my friend Kerry said that she likes it because it's not just a words game, which is also a brilliant thing, that yes, it's a words game, but there's moments where you need to be thinking about the arithmetic, or, okay, let's learn the deck, and let's plan how these borders are going to fit together, or, okay, I'm needing to focus on this other aspect. It feels different, and like the mini deck feels very different. But it is, even though it's not just like what you might expect from a words game, it is still about making words. So fundamentally, if the idea of putting words together is not for you, then it's not for you. If the idea of cooperating is not for you, I mean, I guess you could play it solo, but if you don't like that either, it's not for you. And if you really want to play 5 players, I mean, some people said that they would play it 5 players, but I really wouldn't recommend it, because then there'll be too much luck in terms of what you get, and it's not designed for all the levels to be playable with 5.
Right.
And so I guess I would say, sure, buy the deck for one of the other games. If you really want to play with 5 players, maybe play Wibble or something. But if you want to play Questable, try it. But I would have strong reservations, and I would not recommend it. Do not buy Questable if you're looking for a big party game. And do not look for it if you're looking for a very short, snappy game, because even though the levels can be quick, they do take, like, I would say, at least 10 minutes to play through a level, and then that's just one level, and the idea is that you're playing a few, so it's a nice thing to play a few and then stop whenever you want, which is another brilliant thing we never said. Even though we've organized them into chapters, I do kind of expect people, when it comes to reality, to be like, oh, we've played level 7, okay, we'll stop here, rather than necessarily carrying on until, like, play until you want to stop. And it's like just easy to do like a tally on a bit of paper or something to remember we got to level 7 and that's where we'll pick up next time. But it's not for everyone, and that's the key thing. So as a very quick case study, well, firstly, I want to remind, and I normally do this much early in the show, but I love that we've gone super chaotic. So everyone out there, if you're watching live, please do feel free to comment, ask questions from Like Follow. I mean, comment, ask questions, obviously, from Like Follow, it serves me well, but commenting and asking questions, that's why I do this thing live. And even if you're watching it after the fact on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, please do get your comments or questions in. I reply to everyone that's respectful that I'm able to. And yeah, so how did thinking about the I was going to say, how did thinking about the target audience influence the design of this game? And I'll say one thing that it's influenced me was to make the arithmetic levels slightly later, and also the levels where you really have to know the deck slightly later. Because I'm assuming that if people play on level 1, then by the time they get to level 30, they will know the deck fairly intimately. But I don't want them to have to know, okay, there's exactly this many of this and of that, to just have a chance at a so-called tricky level. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. That has definitely informed our design. And it's interesting because I think the difficulty levels have also, it's allowed, we're lucky that we're able to consider a wider market because we have this opportunity to make those difficulty levels and think, okay, easy can be for people who are less knowledgeable or comfortable with word games, or younger players who might not have the vocabulary to feel comfortable in the higher
And that
levels.
might
So it's
not
great to
be
be
any.
able to expand.
Sorry to interrupt. That might not
Yeah,
be anything to do with English as a second language. That might just be you've not played many games.
exactly, exactly. Uh, and like I said, or our younger folks, as we've talked about, since I love using games for teaching, right, and for learning with kiddos, and that's how I came into board game design. I love to think about young people getting to play the younger kids getting to play the easy level. So that has definitely, I think, informed some of our structure in the design as well. And totally agree with you on people that are comfortable with a word game, throwing math into the equation at some point definitely is more challenging, right? It becomes, because it's tackling a different part of our brain, and because we're our main market is people who are going to be interested in a word game. They're not necessarily the people who are like, and let me do math at the same time. So, so I think that is a really important part of informing how we're structuring the difficulty levels and all of that good stuff. Yeah, and it's been a great journey. Can I say
And
a brilliant thing that is getting to work with you? Am I allowed to say that?
you're allowed to say whatever you
Oh,
want.
good.
I
Well,
mean,
good. That's another brilliant thing. I know we're past brilliant things, but I wanted to throw it in there.
oh, thank you very much. And so it's at the point where I do kind of want to wrap up. I don't feel like we've come to a clean conclusion, but we
Probably
have
not.
had some thoughts about, you know, why it's important. I think we've covered that fairly well, and how to find who your audience is, how to find your focus. I think for all the snide remarks about finding the fun, I think finding the fun is a really valuable thing. Like,
Yes.
get the game played, and then if a certain number of people are legitimately enjoying it, or if people intimately familiar with a certain demographic say this demographic would enjoy it. For example, if Ellie Dix, a maths teacher, well, a former maths teacher, I should say, said, hey, this would be really good in classrooms teaching maths, I'm going to trust her, even though she's not a maths student, like a 12-year-old or whatever anymore. But similarly, like if you say, hey, this is going to be great for kids learning, I'm going to trust you more than myself because you are more intimately familiar with teenagers learning stuff at home. And so play the thing, and then you can imagine what's fun, you can imagine what's good, but that's no substitute for actually getting it into the world. I mean, for Yogi, before it was released even by myself, as in a bind before it became Yogi, I was taking it to pubs, literally with strangers and asking them, hey, I've got some really simple game, would you be up for playing it? And then seeing what they could cope with, what they couldn't cope with, and there were like a couple of things that you'd think would be super simple, but then the word count was super important on that game. Just anything with more than like 5 or 6 words, I had to really think carefully about and probably cut. Because even though that sounds like, well, you don't get much design space like that, but you need to think about who's playing it. And honestly, yeah, people, where are people going to be playing it? Yeah, either super extroverted people who like to be silly, like myself, or people who maybe need a bit of inebriation to get to that level of silliness. And non-gamers, that's who I'm targeting. And so think about that. Show it to the people. See what they respond. See what see what resonates with. And it's about, I guess, finding the focus is contextual with your audience. It's like, what's the focus of this game that will spark excitement for your audience? Do you have anything else to say about this whole topic?
Yeah, I think it's just twofold. It's valuable to the design, and it's valuable to if you're taking it to the point of being a product, it's valuable to that as well, because you do have to. I mean, the reality is, if you're not wanting to just play it with the people in your immediate sphere, and you want to put it out there, you got to know who those people are that need the message.
Well, at this point, Kirsten, I've asked you lots of questions. Would you like to ask me a question? And everyone else watching, question of the day, question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. Question of the day.
Okay, this one's just silly. I don't know.
That's what we're all about.
Is there a food item? And I'm wondering if I know this already for you, but is there a food item that you just can't live without, that you're like, this is the one food item that I must have in my life?
I think I'm very adaptable. I mean, I guess my one staple is water with effervescent vitamins in it. And so, honestly, earlier today, I had my shower. I did like my morning routine that I've been advised because my face had some problems. So it's been clearing up really well, thankfully. But when I take my vitamins, and with the water, it's about drinking the water, but like just seeing the pill drop down and then fizzle up, sparks a little bit of joy in me. And then it makes sure that I at least drink 1 liter of water, and then like, oh yeah, I finished that because I remember because of this. And so I think that, yeah, it's not sugary, it's not got calories, it's got to taste. I'm sure, and I looked it up to see how much I could have safely, if you know what I mean. And I found out that if I have more than 4 pills a day, then it's actually unsafe. You're only meant to have one, but 4 is the point at which it would be actually problematic. So, but if I, yeah, didn't, I think I'm adaptable, but I love that. I love having tomato juice in my fridge. I love having staples, but I could replace them.
I was thinking you might say cheese, because I remember the 400th. Oh,
hello,
Alex's
Alex.
cheese.
Who says, I would say cheese, although I could live without it. Would it be a life worth living?
I thought Beth was going to say cheese, Alex, because I remember joining for the cheese tasting for the 400th.
That was really good fun. And I do very much like cheese, but I think I could live without it.
I was torn. The staple meal, I don't know if I'm supposed to answer the question of the day, but the staple meal item that I think I could just do that and nothing else would be okay as my staple, entree would be chicken, because there's so much you can do with it. I love curry. I love Italian. Like I did chicken parmesan earlier this week. There's so much you can do with
two things. Like I love onions.
Yeah. Oh, I love onions too.
But, Alex says, I also remember a potato taste test at some point. There was a peanut butter taste test. I did not taste test potatoes on stream. I don't.
Fun thing about potatoes. I teased.
I did have Jasmine. A month where I ate basically just potatoes and tomato juice for 6 days of the week.
Oh my goodness!
It was, it was actually quite nice to kind of sort of reset, and kind of it was almost more of a mindfulness exercise at some points, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I'm glad I went through that. But yeah.
I teased Kiwi at one point. I can't remember who I said it to, but I said, you guys know that if you have potatoes cooked 2 different ways, that's not 2 different vegetables, right? Because I feel like they'll have like hot chips and mashed potatoes and consider that having 2 veg, but it's not. It's just 1 veg 2 ways.
I mean, if you could have sweet potato.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, that here is kumara,
Oh,
but yes, you can have kumara here.
I want to wrap up, but very quickly. I was challenged by my friends Jane and Kat and Josie, who helped me at Terracon. We had to come up with what would be a recipe that would define you. And I've decided that my recipe would be sweet potato, stir fried. There's no garlic, no onions, because I know some people have problems with them and I want it to be accessible. But then it's sweet potatoes, red peppers, a bunch of spices, chili, peanut. I know people are allergic to peanuts, but it's not for everyone. And lots of beetroot juice, just to make it all red.
Yeah.
So if the red pepper wasn't red enough, now I'm making and I might actually put noodles in there, but now it's red because of the beetroot juice, and noodles actually absorb things too. So nutritious. That might have been a reply to the multiple types of potato, or it might have been a reply to the dish that we call the sweet bez, because Jane suggested substituting potato for sweet potatoes. You've got the bez and then the sweet bez. But
awesome.
I do want to wrap up, and I want to say over to you. What are you up to? You can share a button if you want to. I'm going to have a friend over in about half an hour. I am going to tidy up this table, put these pens into one bag, put these other pens into another bag, and then put my paper off to the side so I can resume working on it later this afternoon. I'm also going to definitely need to go to the bank to sort out some things and possibly pay someone, but also I'm apparently running short, which should be problematic, and I need to send some details to Gigamic, which is overdue, so they can actually pay me because I'm overdue some money. And by the way, that's not because of Gigamic being bad, that's my fault at this point. I should have sent them details because I assumed that once I sent them the details, they would just keep them. But apparently after they lost the details, I don't know. I don't want to badmouth my publisher. They're a lovely publisher. They're great people. Go and buy my game, please. Anyway, so I'm going to then buy some new pens. I think I'm going to buy a big pink. This isn't big enough. I want something as big as this. You can tell the difference, maybe just about, but the nibs are very different. If I open it up, you can see I want something like the big chunky nib of the yellow, but for pink. And then I'm going to be finishing off all my art. Oh, now I've got paint on my hands. Like this, like the lower A, but with slightly different shading because more considered. And then that's what I'll be doing. And then going to sleep and hopefully having a decent sleep. In time for playtesting tomorrow. That's what I'm up to. Is there anything that you want to share? Something that you want to do? I like that. Sweets and spicy bears. That should be the name of the
chili.
Because it kind of sounds like I am a sweets and spicy person, and it does reflect me because I'm a little bit spicy.
Perfect. Alex,
I love it. Yes. What are you up to today? Is there anything that you want to share?
Well, soon I'll go to bed. Because it's late here in New Zealand, and tomorrow is the last day of the school holidays for my kiddos before they return to school on Monday, and my husband's off work, so we'll probably do some family time. I may be able to play test tomorrow, I may not. And then getting ready for the kids to go back to school on Monday, and definitely continuing to work and get a bunch of stuff done to send to the graphic artist for Ovation for the Kickstarter page. Super excited that it's moving right along.
And when are you going to share the Kickstarter preview page? Not like the front thing that you've let me grab that.
Yeah, people can follow it now, but yeah, once the content is in there, that'll be the graphic designer John Merchant is phenomenal. He is so good and he is so fast. But I haven't given him all the info yet, so he can't be that faster than I am. So as soon as he cranks stuff out, and I know he's super quick, then we'll be able to start sharing it. So that should be certainly in May.
And that's the link down there if people want to check it out. Alex has a kid at home, so we're doing a bit of light play and some working. Might be starting on a small music project.
Oh,
That
exciting.
sounds fun.
I want to know more about the music project.
So do
How
I.
cool.
And also, I was feeling like I need to ask you, Alex, if you want to come on before I wrap up in 28 days. The entire series, 1,000 episodes. But let me recap and
Amazing
wrap up
accomplishment.
before we finish up. So to recap, we talked about what barriers there are in your game and whether those barriers are suitable for the audience or not, because every game has some barriers and it's all about context. We talked about being aware of complexity creep and how finding out who your audience is very similar to finding the focus of the game. And it needs to be something that you feel like you have some love for, ideally, but that doesn't mean keep everything that you love. It means, making it the best that it can be for that one purpose. Learning from other people around you. Is it thematically interesting? Is it interesting because it's more simple than other stuff? Because if it's really similar to 3 other games that people can already buy quite easily, then what's the point in it? We talked about our games, Ovation, Questable, Seize the Power, a game about writing words, aiming to match other folk exactly 3 times. And we talked about some of the ways that those games changed. We talked about removing the auctions from Seize the Power, being mindful of the levels and the mathematics and the cards knowledge in Questable, focusing more on, the one aspect of the social aspect of a game about writing words, aiming to match other folk exactly 3 times, of targeting someone who is interested in composers but also engine build and is maybe a teenage boy, seems to be the current thing for Ovation. We talked about this understanding informing the way that we operate for you at friendly local game stores. And actually, I spent a month at a games cafe and recommended a few games, sometimes some of my own, I will admit. And but also at conventions when you're showing off things, asking people a few questions to get to know whether this is a game for them. And yeah, we also talked about how brilliant Questable is because of variety, repeated aspects, and new context and emergent excitement. But then again, it is a words game. So if you're dead set, nope, I'm not going to play a words game, probably not for you. Nope, I need some competition against other humans. Nope, not a game for you. Because nothing is for everyone. And then we had a quick chat about food and the sweet and spicy bears and cheese and vitamin water and
chicken.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember your one now.
Chicken,
thank you. And so yeah, that was what we talked about mainly today. So if you enjoyed that, if you think that it was useful to other people, if you think it would be useful to other people, please share, spread the word. Oh my gosh. And Alex says, I'd like to come on, it's been a while. And is Ovation a card game? Do you get a big hand?
Brunch.
Oh.
You know what was really fun, if I'm allowed to answer that seriously for a second, what was really fun when we played it at Game Artisans of New Zealand, and yes, tip your waitress, you're here all weekend. Shem Phillips and Sam McDonald got to play it for the first time of Garfield Games, and it was so fun to watch them get into the performances where you give each other a ticket and go listen to their performance, and they would actually do golf clap applause for each other and stuff. It was really fun to watch. So You can, if you choose, give your other players a big hand, but you don't necessarily have a big hand of cards. But I love a pun. There's some bad jokes in there, Alex. So you might need to read some of the card text. I wrote some bad puns in there.
I want to say thank you to everyone, whether you're just lurking or whether you're commenting along. Thank you very much. Most importantly, thank you very much for Kirsten Lunde for coming along and nominating a brilliant topic. And if you want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places, stuffbybez.com/streams. Tomorrow will be a very quick show. On Saturday, I'm meeting Anthony Wyatt, who I actually don't know them at all, but I we're following each other on Twitter, I think, and they make games, so we'll learn who this Anthony Wyatt person is on Saturday and get to know a bit more about who they are, how they make games, and all sorts of stuff. If you want to check out Kirsten, how would you like to be found?
Well, definitely follow the Kickstarter if you're interested, and then I'm at Looking Glass Workshop or Looking Glass WS in all the places. Looking Glass Workshop online at the website, Looking Glass WS on Twitter and Instagram.
And yes, I agree. The playtest with Shem and everyone does sound delightful, and you're always welcome. And for now, I think the only thing left to say is, as always, lots of love to everyone, and bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Blue, blue, bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love your fantastic things. Bye-bye.